Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Number the lighthouse keeper's log. The first time I saw the ship, I thought it was a mirage. The kind that appears when you've been alone for too long, staring at the same stretch of ocean until your eyes play tricks on you. It was a moonless night in late October, the kind where the darkness feels almost solid. I was in the lantern room, polishing the brass fittings as I did every evening, when something caught my eye through the glass. A vessel ancient and weathered, drifting silently through the fog bank that had rolled in at sunset. No running lights, no sound of engines or foghorn, just the ghostly outline of what appeared to be a 19th century schooner, its sails hanging in tatters. I grabbed my binoculars, hands trembling slightly from the cold or perhaps from something else. The ship was moving against the current, against the wind, impossible of course. Yet there it was, gliding through the water as if pulled by unseen hands. I reached for the radio. "Harbormaster, this is Craven Rock Lighthouse. Do you copy? Over." Static hissed back at me for several seconds before a voice crackled through. "Craven Rock, this is Harbormaster. Go ahead, Jack. I've got visual on an unidentified vessel about 2 nautical miles offshore, heading southwest. It looks like an old schooner. No lights." No response to signals. A pause. "Repeat that, Jack. A schooner. Affirmative. 2-masted. 19th century by the look of it." The harbormaster's laugh crackled through the static. "You been dipping into that whiskey again, Jack. There's nothing out there but the Macready fishing trawler, and they're due back in an hour." I looked again. The ship was still there, drifting closer to the jagged rocks that gave Craven Rock Lighthouse its name. Rocks that had claimed dozens of vessels over the centuries. "I'm looking right at it, Tom. It's going to run aground if it doesn't change course." "Jack, I'm staring at the radar right now. Nothing but the Macready. Get some sleep, buddy." "You've been up there too long." The radio went silent. I looked back at the water. The ship was gone, vanished as if it had never been there at all. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then I've seen the ship 6 more times. Always at night, always silent, always vanishing when I try to alert someone. I've stopped calling it in. Tom already thinks I'm losing my mind, and maybe I am. 3 months alone on this rock would do that to anyone. But last night something changed. The ship came closer than ever before, close enough that I could make out details I hadn't seen before. The name painted on the bow, peeling and faded, the Lady Lazarus. The figurehead, a woman with her arms outstretched, her face a mask of agony or ecstasy, I couldn't tell which, and there was a man on the deck, standing perfectly still, staring up at the lighthouse. At me. Even from that distance I could feel his gaze boring into me. He raised his hand in greeting, or warning. I did something stupid then. I waved back. The man smiled. I shouldn't have been able to see it from that distance, but I did. A wide, terrible smile that seemed to split his face in half. Then the fog swallowed the ship once more. I didn't sleep after that. I spent the night going through the lighthouse records, dusty logbooks dating back to when Craven Rock was first lit in 1867. I found what I was looking for just as dawn broke over the horizon. April 17, 1889. The schooner Lady Lazarus, carrying timber and 8 souls, ran aground on Craven Rock during a storm. No survivors. The lighthouse keeper at the time, Elias Thorne, reported that the ship had been spotted well before the rocks, but had changed course deliberately, sailing straight for destruction despite all warnings. The final entry in Thorne's log was strange. "They come back for what was promised. God forgive me." The next entry was written in a different hand. Elias Thorne had disappeared the night after the wreck. His replacement found the lighthouse in perfect order, the light still burning, but no sign of Thorne. I closed the logbook, my hands shaking. Outside, the fog was burning off, revealing a calm sea with no sign of any ghostly vessels. Just the endless blue and the distant shape of the fishing trawler Macready heading out for the day's catch. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that I'd seen a real ship, and my mind had filled in the details from stories I must have heard about the area. That's what any rational person would think, but I'm not sure I'm rational anymore, not after what happened next. The package arrived yesterday on the supply boat, a small wooden box, weathered and salt-stained, addressed simply to the keeper, Craven Rock. No return address, no postmark. "Found this washed up on North Beach," said Mike, the supply boat captain. "Figured it was meant for you." I took the box, feeling its strange weight in my hands. "Thanks. Any idea where it came from?" Mike shrugged. "Ocean gives up all kinds of things. Probably fell off a pleasure craft." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming. Better batten down. Forecast says it'll be a bad one." After he left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the box. Something about it felt wrong. The wood was old, very old, and carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I should have thrown it back into the sea. Instead, I opened it. Inside was a pocket watch. Gold, tarnished with age, its chain tangled around a folded piece of parchment. When I picked up the watch, it began to tick. The hands showed 11:47. The note was written in faded ink, the handwriting cramped and desperate. To whoever finds this, I have made a terrible bargain. They promised me I would never die, that I would be the eternal keeper of the light. I did not understand the price. Now I do. The Lady Lazarus comes for payment. She has claimed 8 souls already. She needs 1 more. I cannot leave this place, but perhaps you can break the cycle. At midnight on the anniversary of the wreck, return what was stolen, or become what I have become. Elias Thorne, I dropped the watch as if it had burned me. It clattered on the table, still ticking. The date on my calendar caught my eye, April 16. Tomorrow would be April 17, the anniversary of the wreck. The storm hit that night with a fury I hadn't seen in my 3 years at Craven Rock. Waves crashed against the rocks, sending spray high enough to spatter the lantern room windows. The wind howled like a living thing, finding every crack and crevice in the old lighthouse, making it moan and creak. I kept the light burning, though I doubted any sane captain would have his ship out in such weather. Every few minutes I scanned the horizon with my binoculars, dreading what I might see. At 11:30 p.m. I saw it, the Lady Lazarus, riding the massive swells as if they were gentle ripples. It should have been torn apart by the storm, but it sailed on straight toward the lighthouse. I grabbed the radio. "Mayday, mayday, this is Craven Rock Lighthouse. There's a vessel heading for the rocks. Does anyone copy?" Nothing but static. I tried the emergency line to the Coast Guard. Dead. The pocket watch on the table ticked louder, somehow audible even over the storm. 11:40. I ran down the spiral staircase to the keeper's quarters, grabbed my rain gear and a flashlight, and headed for the door. I had to try to warn them off, even if it was just a hallucination, even if I was losing my mind. The wind nearly knocked me flat when I stepped outside. Rain lashed at my face, so heavy I could barely see. I staggered down the path to the small dock where my boat was moored, or had been. The storm had torn it free. There was no way to reach the ship. I turned my flashlight toward the sea, waving it in wide arcs, the universal signal for danger. "Stay away, rocks ahead." The beam caught the ship much closer now. I could see figures moving on the deck, more than just the man I'd seen before. A full crew, working the sails with mechanical precision. And then I saw him again. The man who had waved to me. He was standing at the bow, one hand on the figurehead, the other extended toward me. Even through the driving rain, I could see his face clearly now. It was my face. I stumbled backward, nearly falling on the slick rocks. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. The pocket watch. I needed to get back to the pocket watch. I fought my way back to the lighthouse, the wind now seemingly pushing against me from all directions at once. It took all my strength to pull the door open and even more to close it behind me. The watch sat on the table where I'd left it. 11:55. Return what was stolen, the note had said. But what had been stolen? What could I possibly give to a ghost ship to break this cycle? I picked up the watch, turned it over in my hands. There was an inscription on the back I hadn't noticed before, nearly worn away by time and seawater. "To Elias, light of my life, forever yours, Eleanor, a love token." But who was Eleanor? I flipped frantically through the logbook until I found entries from before the wreck. Elias mentioned an Eleanor several times, his fiancée, waiting for him in the village. They were to be married when his term as keeper ended, but there was something else. An entry from March 1889, just weeks before the wreck. "Eleanor came with the supply boat today. We quarreled again about my decision to extend my posting. She does not understand that I have found something here, something in the depths that calls to me." I showed her the artifact I recovered from the cave below the lighthouse. She called it wicked and wanted no part of it. She threatened to leave on the Lady Lazarus when it makes port next week. I cannot allow that. The next several pages were torn out. Then the final entry before the wreck. "They come back for what was promised. God forgive me." The watch showed 11:59. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo. The lighthouse shuddered as if struck by a physical blow. The light above me flickered once, twice, then held steady. I knew then what I had to do. I grabbed the watch and ran up the spiral staircase to the lantern room. Through the rain-streaked glass, I could see the Lady Lazarus had nearly reached the rocks. But it wasn't going to crash, it was going to dock somehow against the sheer cliff face. The pocket watch in my hand struck midnight. The second hand stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear footsteps on the stairs behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps climbing toward the lantern room. I turned. Standing in the doorway was the man from the ship. Me, but not me. His clothes were from another century, soaked with seawater that pooled at his feet. His skin had the bloated, pale look of something long submerged. "You found it," he said, his voice like stones grinding together. "After all this time, the watch," I held it up. "It was yours." He shook his head. "It was hers, Eleanor's. I took it from her body after." He trailed off, looking past me to the ship now impossibly moored against the cliff. "They've been searching for it. That's why they can't rest. That's why I can't rest. You're Elias Thorne." A terrible smile spread across his face, the same smile I'd seen on the ship. "Now I'm the keeper, as you are." As you will be, I don't understand. 8 souls on the Lady Lazarus, 8 souls in a leaner. I needed her to stay, you see. I'd found something in the caves, something ancient and hungry. It promised me eternal life if I fed it. Just once every 100 years, a ship full of souls. He gestured to the pocket watch. The watch was the payment proof of my commitment, but Alina found out. She was going to leave, going to tell others what I'd done, what I was planning to do. You killed her, I said, the horror of it dawning on me. You put her on that ship knowing it would wreck. I thought I could control it, Thorn said, his eyes reflecting the spinning beam of the lighthouse lamp. I was wrong. It took them all, including Alina, and then it took me in a way. I've been the keeper ever since, bound to this place, sending ships to their doom every 100 years. But why me? Why now? The cycle is ending. The thing in the caves is waking, hungry for more than just a ship full of souls this time. It wants everything unless what? Unless the debt is paid, return what was stolen, break the cycle. I looked at the watch in my hand. It had started ticking again, though the hands hadn't moved from midnight. The watch. You want me to give it back to them? Thorn's smile widened impossibly, splitting his face almost literally in two, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. No, keeper, the debt is 9 souls, 8 have been paid. 1 remains. He lunged at me suddenly, his hands, now elongated into claws, reaching for my throat. I stumbled backward, crashing into the brass railing that surrounded the lamp. The watch flew from my hand, arcing through the air in seeming slow motion. Thorn froze, his eyes fixed on the falling timepiece. In that moment of distraction, I ducked under his arm and ran for the stairs. I could hear him behind me, no longer bothering with the pretense of humanity, moving in a scuttling, insectal way down the spiral staircase. I reached the bottom and ran for the door, but I knew there was nowhere to go. The storm, the cliff, the sea, all were death sentences. The caves, he'd mentioned caves below the lighthouse. If that's where this all began, maybe that's where it could end. I ran to the storage room, grabbed a flashlight, and found the trapdoor I'd always assumed led to a cellar or cistern. It opened to reveal a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. Thorn's inhuman shriek echoed from somewhere above. He knew what I was doing. I descended into the darkness, the beam of my flashlight revealing rough-hewn steps that looked far older than the lighthouse itself. The air grew colder, damper with each step, carrying a scent of salt and decay. The stairs ended in a natural cavern, its walls slick with seawater and something else, a black, viscous substance that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. The beam of my flashlight didn't penetrate it, rather the darkness seemed to absorb the light, drinking it in. In the center of the cavern was a pool of seawater, perfectly still despite the storm raging outside. And floating in the center of the pool was the pocket watch. I approached cautiously, my light revealing carvings around the edge of the pool, symbols similar to those on the wooden box, but older, cruder. They seemed to writhe and shift when viewed directly, forming patterns that hurt my eyes and made my head throb. The pocket watch ticked loudly in the silence of the cave, each click echoing off the walls like a gunshot. Behind me I heard the scuttling sound again. Thorn had found me. You cannot escape the bargain, he said, his voice now a chorus of whispers. The keeper must provide the final soul, yourself or another. Choose. I turned to face him. What stood in the entrance to the cavern was no longer even remotely human. Thorn had shed all pretense, revealing his true form, a twisted, elongated thing of chitin and teeth, more crustacean than man. What is it? I asked, gesturing to the pool. What's down there? Something old, Thorn chittered. Something that was here long before humans built lights to warn ships away from the rocks. Something that feeds on souls lost at sea, and you made a deal with it, as did the keeper before me and the one before him, back and back to the first sailor who found this cave and thought to bargain with what lived in the depths. I looked at the watch floating in the pool. Elinar's watch, the payment, the binding, the promise of souls to come. Every 100 years, 9 souls, 8 from a ship, 1 from the shore. The keeper's choice: sacrifice yourself or find a replacement. I chose to stay to serve. For eternity, I understood then. Thorn hadn't been taken by the thing in the pool. He had joined with it willingly, becoming its servant, its lure. The face I had seen on the ship, my face, was just another bait to draw me in. And if I refuse, Thorn's mandibles clicked together in what might have been laughter, then the bargain is broken, and it will come for everything. As if in response to his words, the pool began to ripple, the water churning as something beneath the surface stirred. The pocket watch spun in lazy circles, ticking faster and faster. I had seconds to decide. Sacrifice myself to continue this terrible cycle, or refuse and risk whatever apocalypse Thorn was hinting at. Or maybe there was a third option. I lunged forward, reaching for the watch. My fingers closed around it just as something massive breached the surface of the pool, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, ancient beyond comprehension. Thorn shrieked, a sound of rage and fear. No, the bargain must be kept. I am keeping it, I said, clutching the watch. I'm returning what was stolen. I turned and threw the watch with all my strength, not into the pool but at Thorn. It struck him in the center of what had once been his chest, and he screamed as it seemed to burn into him, melting through chitin and into whatever passed for his heart. The debt was never 9 souls, I said, understanding coming to me in a flash of clarity. It was you stole Aliner's life, her future. You're the debt that needs to be paid. Thorn's form began to collapse in on itself, chitin cracking and dissolving as the watch burned through him like acid. No, he gasped, his voice briefly human again. You don't understand what you've done. Behind me, the thing in the pool roared, a sound felt more than heard, a vibration that shook the very foundations of the lighthouse above. The black substance on the walls began to flow like liquid, converging on Thorn's dissolving form. I ran, up the stairs, through the lighthouse, out into the storm. The rain had stopped, but the wind still howled, and the sea churned with unnatural fury. The Lady Lazarus was still there, moored against the impossible cliff face. On its deck stood figures, 8 sailors and a woman in 19th-century dress, Aliner. She looked toward me, raised her hand in what might have been thanks, then turned away as the ship began to move, sailing out to sea. Below me, the lighthouse shuddered as something massive moved through the caves. I could feel the ancient stone cracking, shifting as the creature that had been trapped there for who knows how long began to free itself. I had broken the cycle, but at what cost? The answer came with the dawn. As the first light broke over the horizon, I watched from the cliff edge as the sea around Craven Rock grew calm, unnaturally so. The waves stilled, the surface becoming like glass, reflecting the pink and gold of the sunrise. Then the water began to recede, pulling back from the shore as if drawn by an invisible hand, revealing the seabed littered with the bones of countless shipwrecks. And rising from the depths, a shape vast beyond comprehension, a mountain of flesh and chitin and eyes, rising and rising until it blotted out the sun. The thing that had been trapped in the cave, fed by Thorn's bargain, now free. Not destroyed as I had hoped, but released from its prison. I watched in horror as it rose fully from the sea, a colossus that dwarfed the lighthouse, that made mockery of human scale. It turned slowly, deliberately, until its constellation of eyes fixed on me. It knew me. It had always known me, I realized. From the moment I took the position as keeper, it had been watching, waiting. One massive tentacle rose from the mass, extending toward me with dreadful purpose. I should have run, but where? There was nowhere on earth to hide from something like this. The tentacle stopped just short of touching me. Hovering in the air between us was the pocket watch, somehow intact, ticking steadily. A voice spoke in my mind, ancient and vast. The bargain is broken. The cycle ends, but debts must still be paid. What do you want? I asked, my voice small in the face of this cosmic horror. A new bargain, a new keeper. The light must always be kept. I understood then. The lighthouse had never been built to warn ships away from the rocks. It had been built to keep watch over what lay beneath them. And if I refuse, in answer, the creature began to rise higher, its bulk casting a shadow over the village in the distance. I could see tiny figures pointing, running. They couldn't comprehend what they were seeing, but they knew enough to be afraid. Then I feed, not 9 souls every century, but all souls, everywhere. And if I agree, what happens to me? You become the keeper, the true keeper. As it was meant to be, I looked at the watch still floating between us, Aliner's watch, a token of love perverted into a token of bondage, but perhaps it could be something else, a symbol of duty, of sacrifice. I reached out and took it, the tentacle wrapped around my wrist, not crushing but binding. I felt something flow from the creature into me, knowledge, power, and a terrible responsibility. The bargain is made, the light is yours to keep. The creature began to sink back into the sea, the waters rushing back to cover it. As it disappeared beneath the waves, I felt a change coming over me. My senses expanded, my awareness stretching out to encompass the lighthouse, the rocks, the sea around them. I could feel every ship for miles, sense their courses, know their crews as intimately as I knew myself. And I could feel it below me, ancient and patient, sleeping once more. Not dead, not gone, but contained, for now. I returned to the lighthouse, climbing the spiral staircase to the lantern room. The light was still burning, though I hadn't tended it in hours. It would always burn now, I knew, as long as I was the keeper. I took out the logbook and made a new entry, April 17, 2023. The bargain is renewed, the light will be kept, God help us all. I closed the book and looked out at the now calm sea, the pocket watch ticking steadily in my hand. In the distance I could see a ship approaching, the supply boat, right on schedule. I would tell them there had been a storm, that everything was fine now, that the keeper of Craven Rock Lighthouse was at his post, as he would always be. And when Mike asked, as he inevitably would, if I'd seen anything strange during the night, I would smile and say no. Just another quiet night watching the sea. The light must always be kept, and I am the keeper now, forever.